We talked about this briefly 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact. The situation related to the young man and the fact that he had was reacting to a circumstance associated with a family member who apparently died suddenly. No one knew about it, but she had a health condition that no one knew anything about. And as a result, apparently there were some postings. Am I correct on that? Social media postings?
Yeah.
Something like that.
My first question on that is, what is your thought about the postings in the sense of the term empathy? Sally?
I mean, I think, what first comes to my mind is not even the postings when I think about empathy in this particular situation.
Okay.
I think what I heard and what I, because I wasn't here for this conversation
Right.
when
Me
y'all had it a
neither.
couple weeks ago.
Okay.
But what I had been hearing even before these posts were made, these threats were made, about the girl.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, complete lack of empathy.
It was insane.
It
It was
was-
like, it was
I mean, it
so
wasn't-
just
it-
genuinely
And it's
terrible.
Not, yeah. It's not like everybody was saying bad things or anything.
No,
but
but-
I do think
Yeah.
there were like some people who were being disrespectful,
Mm-hmm.
and it's genuinely baffling to me how people don't understand the gravity of like what's just happened. I
Mm-hmm.
guess like that's truly, I can't even imagine.
I think it's easy to be critical of you, meaning I was always like to say, your ilk, your kind. But this is something that comes about as a result of, and I use the term patterning, experience. If you really get right down to it, going back to the term patterning, following somebody, their attitude, that there's, in other words, there's something that has influenced folks to the point where, to your comment, Sally, they don't realize the gravity of either the event or their words. Okay, let's be broad in this. Why? What accommodates that kind of reaction? I guess that's what would teach that kind of reaction. Any thoughts from either of you two?
I mean, I think I've brought this up a couple times before, but I feel like our generation kind of has this weird way that we kind of choose to laugh at things that shouldn't be laughed at.
Okay.
Like, I know, at least like on social media, like sometimes you'll open your social media and you'll see like a car crash or
Yeah.
something. And there'll
And
be
it's just
people
like-
in the comments like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy, or making jokes and things like that. And I don't think that's baffling to me. Like, I don't think they understand that this is someone's life that they're discussing.
Yeah.
And how precious that is, and how, careful you need to be and respectful, honestly. But I do think that social media and just the need to like not take things so seriously kind of has something to do with that.
I'll acknowledge the medium, in this case social media. The medium plays a role, but there's something behind that medium. There's some message that was developed and promoted that was attractive to the recipients, that is, the student, the youngster, who says, oh, that's neat, I'll act like that, I'll be like that, I'll pattern myself like that. And I'm wondering, is that, should we hold, in other words, should we hold some adults accountable? Elena, I want to jump to you on that one.
I mean, probably. I feel like a lot of times, especially, I mean, we're still young. We're still, I think, at a formative age.
Right.
And I think a lot of times people are just the result of their environment.
Uh-huh.
So I think you should definitely, it's a big issue. I don't know what exactly is causing it, obviously. I think there's probably a lot of things that are influential in why our generation is, as Sally said, like very lacking of like empathy, sort of. And maybe some adults should be blamed for that, because I mean, it's not like we completely set up everything that made it this way, you know? It's gradual. It's not like it just started with us.
I love that description. It is gradual. It's incremental. Mm-hmm. One thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And so recognizing that we have, for all intents and purposes, identified the problem, I'm wondering, is there a solution? And I'm going to say to you, I think that literally, I point to myself, our generation, those who are in authority or in a position of influence, be they entertainers, be they the people that own the businesses, that are promoting the message, that are pushing the message, I think they play a role in this too. And I think to a degree, and Sally, I acknowledge your criticism, quote, of your generation, but I think there's accountability on the part of people that frankly are not in this room, other than myself. I'm in the room, but really, I think that's a big issue. And so my next question is, how do we remediate? How do we correct this problem? Any thoughts?
Yes. So I think, I mean, from my perspective, I understand what you're saying, and I agree. It's not just our generation.
Oh my gosh, you are not to blame.
Right.
You are the carriers,
Right.
if you will, but you're not to blame. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, I mean, from what I've experienced, and I know I just talked about social media, but truly I think that there's something to be said for seeing something like that, or, you know, someone making a video about a topic that's a little bit like, wow, I didn't know that was okay to talk about, and
Right,
like kind of looking around and being like, is that okay? Like, is that what we're doing now? And people being like, yeah, or like, oh, is this okay to laugh at? And then you see people laughing at it, so you're like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing now. I guess I can't. I can't hang if I don't laugh at this. Like,
Right.
I can't hang. I'm not funny. I am too serious. I'm too soft. Whatever.
There's the peer pressure to accept and absorb it is there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that the solution in that case, which I think plays a huge part in being desensitized to this kind of thing, would just be saying, actually, no. Like, this is
Right.
this is insane. You know, people need to start being like, are you serious?
Okay. I'm going to stick with the solution. One of the common themes, and we're going to talk about a few other items here later on. As a matter of fact, I'm going to move off the education. I want to move to the political realm here in a few moments. Then we're going to come back to education here. But one of the common themes for all of this is the school environment. Mm-hmm. Okay? So my question to you, and this isn't, I'm going to say at the outset, an unfair question, okay?
Okay.
But that's the benefit and the privilege. We get to speculate, opine, and go off the deep end if we want. I'm usually off the deep end. We'll acknowledge that. But the aspect of this is, would it not be beneficial for this topic to be literally a curriculum, a course topic in school?
Just
The
empathy
topic of
101.
empathy? Yeah.
Well, you can call it Empathy 101. How about...
How to be a decent person.
Yes. Not
Yeah.
only that. Okay, we'll stick with the word empathy. The sense of a feeling about somebody's circumstances, conditions, and experiences that... And here's the problem. It requires you to project yourself. Mm-hmm. I got to project myself in. Go ahead.
I actually have something to say on this, which is when I was in, I believe it was 4th grade, my teacher told me that there is an actual statistic out there that's like kids who read a lot are a lot more likely to be more empathetic because you read it and you're like in the story, you're immersed, and you're actually like seeing it like, yeah, it's like you're being empathetic. And I think there's a lot less reading going on. That could be something. That could be a reason why. But I think especially once we get to be like teenagers, like I don't really have much time to read, right?
No.
And so it's
Or
like,
you have your phone. So
or you
you're
have
gonna
your
choose
phone, so
that.
you're going to choose that. So it's just like, maybe that's something. Maybe it's just we try to introduce more literature and more like maybe actually read this book and imagine yourself in this scenario.
Literature and philosophy.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think when you talk about a class, I think in college at least, I think we have classes like that. Like we have classes on ethics. I've taken a class on ethics. I've taken a class on
Right.
psychology, and I hope to take classes on philosophy and
Yeah.
all of those things. They're not things that are taught right now.
No.
So maybe that should be something that we
Okay,
learn.
so this goes back to the comment of making it a curriculum. But to your point, Elena, the fact that you don't have a lot of time to read. However, if it is part of the course,
then I mean you have to. Then you have to make the time for it.
Have to make
Yeah.
it. Well, hey, forget making the time. What if you come into the classroom and they give you, let's say, a book, and you have, out of a 45-minute class, they give you 25 minutes to read the book, or read the paper, read the document, whatever it may be. The next 20 minutes is spent discussing it.
You know, I think I was just thinking about classes like that, and to your point, I think discussion is a huge part of a solution to this.
Interchange of topic and points of view.
Right. But I also think that when it comes to being desensitized or laughing at these kinds of things or not taking them as seriously as they need to be taken, I feel like if you were to have a one-on-one conversation with anybody about a topic as heavy as what we've been discussing, nobody is going to say in a one-on-one conversation, oh, that's funny, or oh, that something
right.
No one's gonna
like
make a
that.
joke about
But
it.
when
right?
when you're behind a screen or when you're in a big group like that, it seems more okay. So when you're all having a discussion and you see, wait, so nobody else actually thinks that.
Yeah.
Wait, so I don't have to act like tough
Right.
or anything. I guess is what I was just gonna say, especially with what we've been discussing so far about being desensitized and kind of how recently and like some in the area there's been a lot of kind of tragic events happening. And I think to your point about discussion and how important conversation is and things like that, I think that it's important because as 17, 18, even 14-year-olds, we're dealing with we're being faced with some pretty heavy stuff, some pretty adult stuff. And I think that a solution in helping the way that we handle these types of things is talking to us like we're adults.
Not only talking to you like you're adults, but also understanding that you too have feelings. I think too often as adults, we look at youngsters and we say, when the question I say to you, do such and such. And you turn and you say, why? And the response is, because I said so. Well, that is demeaning your effort to logically understand why you're doing something. And I think too often that transition from child to teenager and young adult, that transition at times doesn't get transferred easily by the adults. Because I said so.
Yeah. That may have worked when I was 12, but
Right. I'm pretty near an adult at this point.
Well, really, I tend to the 12-year-olds and I will say yes, ma'am to them. I say yes, ma'am to any young lady. I don't care what age. I just do, and they say, well, you're the adult. Yeah, but you know what? The youngster needs to hear that they are respected. And I think to that point, we'll move on to that issue here. We touched on it. The tragic issues that have happened recently at West Carteret. We talked about that young lady. There's another situation that unfortunately occurred recently, I understand, and an individual took their life. Now, my question to you is, what impact has that had across the classes, the in the school? Was it shocking, or you're nodding your head? It was.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And I don't want to
No, we're going to keep it very broad.
Yeah. But I just was gonna say, I mean, it's shocking, and it's also, you can kind of feel it. You can feel it, especially living in a small town. You can feel it, it kind of affects everything. And it spreads pretty quickly because it's most people know everybody,
Yeah.
at a school like that. And I just remember, I mean, even if you're not super close with the person, it feels like it affects you.
Okay, here's the next question. Is it a sense of guilt or a sense of what the heck just happened?
I feel like for me, it was a sense of, I was just completely, I felt I felt empathetic. I felt
no,
very
I understand
empathetic
that,
towards, but I I felt scared.
Really?
I did. I felt scared because it just felt very like, I don't know. For me personally, I feel like up until this year, I haven't really been like exposed to a whole lot of adult concepts like
Well,
that.
You call that adult concepts, life concepts.
Yeah.
Let's use that term.
I mean, but they're heavy. They're extremely heavy.
I would agree
and
with
and
that.
I just felt like all of a sudden, it just feels like a lot is going on, and it
does.
feels kind of like
it feels like one thing after
it
another.
feels like chaos. It feels like confusing and scary, and also you're so sad, and you know that everybody else is sad as well.
All right. Is this creating conversation among the students, or is it more just a word and you just move on? Knowing look, that sort of thing. Is that what's the communications on that?
I'd say it depends.
I think it depends on
How close you
how
are to the
close
other,
you are to whoever was affected. Yeah.
and how you knew how close you were to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect of this, and of course we've seen this situation with a tragedy. For example, I'm going to pick on East Carteret High School with the death of the four youngsters in the airplane crash, and of course mother's boyfriend and the two pilots. So there were multiple people involved in that. However, most of the focus was on the youngsters. I would say, 98% of the focus was on the youngsters. My question is this a topic that can easily be discussed from teacher to student, and, if you will, in some way, an outsider? You don't think so?
I don't
really
think,
think so,
I don't think
no.
so, and I think that's kind of what I was saying when I was touching on treating us like adults.
Yeah.
I feel like the way to get across to us is to be able to relate to us, and
Actually
it doesn't
discuss
seem
it.
right. And I mean, especially like with like most recently like what's occurred, I had we had a discussion with one of our teachers.
Did the teachers say, okay, let's just sit down and let's all of us talk about this for a few
No, I
minutes?
didn't know about it until after school Sally told me some.
Oh, okay.
But like I just heard about it very recently.
Okay, so in other words, I'm going to be so bold as to say the adults didn't feel very comfortable talking either to you or talking about the issue in general.
I mean, probably, but I think there's also a point to be made about like privacy and like respecting whether or not you need to, like a teacher needs to
That's a good
put that
point.
information out there as opposed to just people telling their friends.
But then the other side of that is people telling their friends not necessarily accurately.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then on top of that, not only not necessarily accurately, but influencing the conversation with observations, may or may not be relevant, but observations that would, I think, better be done. And I go back, this leads beautifully into that conversation about maybe we need a curriculum. I mean, seriously, maybe we need, in light of the experience that we had, and we're going to pick on that situation 3 weeks ago, where a student didn't feel that his family member was being treated properly, and especially in social media, but otherwise other areas. And the fact that the students that were perpetrating this messaging didn't feel any accountability.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that they definitely should crack down on because I think what those students did was absolutely unacceptable.
But I think
and it's just so
this
stupid.
goes to life and death situations, or for that matter, experiences of immense failure. Let's say an individual's family has some disastrous experience, failure of their family, failure of their business, or something of that nature. What I'm hearing from you is there is a loss of connectivity. That all of a sudden you drop the veil, or the wall, and we don't talk about it.
I wouldn't say we don't talk about it. I would say that there's not a whole lot of conversation between adults and I don't think there's a lot of adults in the conversation, and I think that's kind of important, especially as like, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I feel at this like point in our lives, when you're 14 years old, hopefully you haven't had to deal that much with grief or loss or anything like that. And so when something like this happens at your school, you're kind of looking to the adults to see how they react and how they talk about it. And when they don't, it's
then
kind of
you just
like,
have to do whatever anyone else does.
Yeah.